Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we travel deep into the frozen heart of Manitoba, into its forgotten corners, isolated small towns, endless wilderness, and places where help does not reach, where 7 of the most disturbing, real, and terrifying true horror stories have surfaced. These are not legends or campfire tales. These are real, documented encounters from ordinary people who lived through something they still struggle to explain. From abandoned farmhouses buried under snow to basements hiding secrets. From disappearances that defy explanation to things seen moving in the trees that should not exist. Tonight, you will hear horrors that refuse to stay buried. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Manitoba, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and this happened to me when I was 26, during my first winter working as a wildlife surveyor in northern Manitoba. I took the job because I needed the money, and because I thought I understood isolation. I was wrong. My assignment was simple on paper. Document animal movement near a decommissioned service road that cut through miles of frozen forest. Locals warned me not to stay out past sunset. They said the road changed at night. I laughed it off. Everyone has stories up there. The first week was quiet, almost peaceful. Snow swallowed sound. The trees stood like frozen witnesses. But on the 8th night, as I packed my gear, I noticed something strange. My boot prints behind me were already filling in, even though there was no wind. Then I heard it. A slow, uneven exhale. Not close enough to see, not far enough to ignore. It sounded like the road itself was breathing behind me, matching my steps, waiting for me to stop. I didn't. But part of me still wonders what would have happened if I had. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been exhaustion. Isolation messes with your head. That's what I told myself as I reviewed trail cam footage. Everything looked normal until one clip made my stomach tighten. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the camera shook. Not violently, just enough to blur the frame. Then the audio spiked with a low, wet sound, like air being forced through something too narrow. The trees in the background leaned inward, though there was no storm recorded that night. My supervisor, Mark, brushed it off when I showed him. Probably ice shifting, he said, but he avoided replaying the clip. Mark was a numbers guy, calm, logical. Seeing him uneasy scared me more than the sound itself. That evening, I went back out, determined to prove it was nothing. The sun dropped fast, bleeding orange into black. As I stood on the road, the forest went unnaturally quiet. Then my radio crackled, not with voices, but with breathing, slow, patient, right behind me. I didn't turn around. I ran, and the breathing ran too. I didn't report what happened that night. Not because I thought it was nothing, but because some part of me felt watched, like admitting it would invite whatever followed me closer. Instead, I focused on routine. Coffee, notes, numbers, normality. That illusion shattered when I found fresh footprints outside my cabin the next morning. They weren't animal tracks. They weren't human either. Too long, too shallow. As if whatever made them didn't press down fully, but skimmed the surface of the snow. They circled the cabin once, slowly, then stopped right outside my bedroom window. Inside, the air felt heavier than it should have. The heater was running, but my breath fogged anyway. That's when I noticed faint marks on the glass. 3 curved streaks, like something had rested a hand there and slid it downward. That night, I locked every door, and kept the lights on. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the same time as the camera clip, the road outside my cabin let out a long, shuddering exhale. And this time, it said my name. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping a flashlight like it could save me, replaying the sound of my name over and over in my head. It wasn't spoken loudly. It didn't need to be. It knew I was listening. At sunrise, I drove straight to Mark's office. I didn't soften the story. I told him everything. The breathing, the footprints, the voice. He went quiet. The kind of quiet people get when they recognize something they hoped never to hear confirmed. Mark finally admitted there had been previous reports along that road. Workers quitting suddenly, trail cams going missing, one man who wandered into the trees and was found days later with his lungs frozen solid, mouth open like he'd been screaming into something that breathed back. They called it road pressure, a phenomenon, a convenient name. I demanded to be reassigned. Mark agreed too quickly. As I packed that evening, the breathing returned. But this time, it wasn't following me. It was waiting. I was supposed to leave the next morning. But Manitoba doesn't care about plans. A sudden whiteout rolled in overnight, turning the road into a blank wall of snow and noise. Dispatch ordered me to stay put. One more night, they said. Like nights were interchangeable. By dusk, the forest felt different. Closer somehow. The trees leaned inward, their branches creaking in slow, deliberate rhythms. I tried distracting myself by packing, but every few minutes, I'd pause, listening, waiting. At 2:16 a.m., the heater cut out. The silence that followed was immediate and total. Then the breathing started again, not behind me this time, but under the cabin. The floorboards vibrated with each inhale, dust trembling from the rafters. I dropped to my knees, pressing my ear to the wood, and realized the sound wasn't echoing. It was testing. A low scrape followed, like something dragging itself along the length of the road outside, circling, learning where I slept. When the exhale came again, it felt warmer, closer, like it was finally right beneath me. I snapped. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, and ran for the truck despite the storm. The engine struggled, coughing like it didn't want to wake whatever waited outside. As the headlights cut through the snow, I saw the road clearly for the first time. It wasn't flat. The asphalt bulged and sank in slow waves, rising and falling as if something massive shifted beneath it. Each breath matched the movement. Inhale, the road lifted. Exhale, it collapsed inward. Tire tracks ahead of me ended abruptly, swallowed where the surface dipped too deep. Then the radio turned on by itself. No static, no voices, just breathing, perfectly synchronized with the road's movement. I slammed the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires screaming, and for a moment, I thought I'd make it. The road rose sharply. The headlights caught a shape forming in the asphalt. Suggestions of ribs, a hollow where a mouth should be. Before the ground dropped away, and the truck stalled dead. Behind me, something exhaled with relief. I don't remember opening the truck door. I only remember the cold hitting my lungs so hard it felt like glass. The storm had softened, snow drifting down in slow, silent sheets. The road beneath my boots felt warm, wrongly warm, and slightly soft, like standing on a living thing trying to stay still. The breathing stopped when I stepped away from the truck. That terrified me more than when it chased me. I ran toward the tree line, sinking ankle deep with every step, expecting the ground to surge up and grab me. It didn't. Instead, I felt something following beneath the surface, keeping pace, adjusting to my speed. The forest offered no comfort, Every tree looked identical, every direction wrong. Then I heard it again. Not my name this time, but Mark's voice. Calm, reassuring, telling me to come back to the road, that it was safer there. I almost believed it. That's when I realized the breathing had changed rhythm. It wasn't matching me anymore. It was anticipating me. I tripped near the tree line and slammed face first into the snow. When I looked back, the road had risen again, higher than before, arching like a massive chest drawing in air. The surface cracked in slow lines, revealing darkness underneath, endless and deep. I screamed then, not out of fear, but rage. Whatever this thing was, it wanted me to panic, to come closer, to be swallowed quietly like the others. I crawled backward into the trees, pressing myself against the rough bark of a spruce, refusing to move. The breathing returned, slower now, curious. Branches creaked as the road shifted closer, roots snapping beneath the pressure. The forest resisted in ways I hadn't expected, trees groaning like they were alive too, pushing back, holding the line. Eventually, the breathing grew uneven, frustrated. As dawn approached, the road began to sink again, retreating, flattening, pretending to be harmless asphalt once more. The storm cleared. The forest went still. I stayed frozen against that tree until the sun finally found me. Rescue found me hours later, half buried in snow and barely conscious. They said I was lucky. I laughed when they told me that, a sharp, broken sound that scared them into silence. I tried to explain what had happened, but daylight makes monsters sound ridiculous. The road looked normal again, flat, cracked, dead. Back in town, Mark avoided my eyes. My report was quietly archived, marked as exposure-induced hallucinations. They let me resign without questions, like they were relieved I chose to leave on my own. Before I went, Mark finally spoke. He told me the road wasn't built where it was by accident. The original path had shifted repeatedly during construction, as if the ground refused to stay still. Old survey maps showed the road looping back on itself, breathing space into places that should have collapsed. They didn't build it, Mark said. They pinned it. That night in my motel room, I heard it again. Faint, distant, patient, coming from beneath the bed, sinking with my heartbeat. I left Manitoba 2 days later. New city, new job. I told myself distance would break whatever connection I'd made. For a while, it almost worked. The nightmares faded. The breathing stopped. Then I noticed something during late-night drives. Certain roads felt warmer than others, softer, like they were listening. Sometimes, when traffic dies down and the world goes quiet, I feel a slow rise beneath the tires, followed by a gentle release. In those moments, I don't speed up. I don't slow down. I keep perfectly still, pretending not to notice. Because I understand now. The road doesn't hunt everyone. It remembers. And once it learns the sound of your breath, it never forgets. It waits for the moment you're tired, alone, and far from help. When the distance between asphalt and lung feels small enough to close. If you ever feel the road breathe back beneath you, don't stop. My name is Laura McInnes, and this happened when I was 32, during my final winter living near the western shore of Lake Winnipeg. I moved there after my divorce, chasing quiet and space, somewhere flat and honest, where nothing could sneak up on you. That belief didn't last long. Locals warned me about the lake at night, especially in February, when the ice grows thick enough to feel permanent. They told me never to follow the lights if I saw them beneath the surface. I assumed they meant ice fishing lanterns or reflections from distant towns. The first time I noticed them, I was walking my dog just before midnight. The lake stretched out like a frozen ocean, moonlight glinting off endless white. Then I saw a faint glow deep below the ice. Soft, bluish, moving slowly, as if something were drifting underneath. My dog stopped dead, hackles raised, low growl. The light pulsed once, and something far below the ice knocked back. After that night, the lights appeared more often, always after dark, always just far enough out that I had to step closer to be sure they were real. They never broke the surface. They never stayed still either, drifting slowly beneath the ice like curious eyes. I asked my neighbor Cal about them. He'd lived by the lake his entire life. When I described the color, his expression tightened. He told me stories about fishermen who vanished without broken ice, about snowmobiles found abandoned with engines still warm, pointed straight toward the lake's center. Lake doesn't give back what it takes, he said. Sometimes it just lets you hear it breathing first. That night, the lights came closer to shore than ever before. I stood at the edge of the ice, heart pounding, watching them gather beneath my feet, 3 of them now, pulsing in slow rhythm. Then I felt it. A vibration, not cracking ice. Something knocking from below, asking to be let out. I tried to ignore the lights after that. But Lake Winnipeg has a way of inserting itself into your thoughts. During the day, it looked harmless, flat, endless, asleep. At night, it felt awake, a presence pressing against the underside of the world. Sleep became difficult. I'd wake to the sound of ice shifting, deep groans echoing through the shoreline like something stretching after a long rest. One night, I dreamed I was standing on the lake, staring down through clear ice into dark water. Shapes moved below, slow and deliberate, brushing against the ice from beneath, leaving pale streaks where they touched. I woke to my dog whining at the door. Outside, the lights were back, closer than ever. They weren't drifting now. They were waiting. I noticed faint lines etched into the ice above them, like spiderweb cracks forming without sound. When I leaned closer, the glow brightened, responding to me. Then I heard it. Not a knock this time, but a soft scraping, like fingers dragging along the underside of the ice, searching for a thinner place. The next day, Cal came over unannounced. He said he'd seen footprints leading from my porch to the lake early that morning. Bare footprints. I told him I hadn't been outside. He believed me instantly, which made my stomach drop. Cal finally told me what people didn't say out loud. Long before ice roads and fishing shacks, the lake had taken entire camps during sudden freezes. People trapped beneath forming ice, their lanterns still lit as the surface sealed over them. Some believed the lights were reflections. Others believed they were invitations. Some nights, Cal said quietly, the lake remembers what it holds. That evening, the lights formed a pattern, almost a circle, directly offshore from my house. The ice groaned louder than ever, bending without breaking. I felt a pull then, subtle but undeniable, like gravity shifting sideways, urging me forward. For the first time, I wanted to step onto the ice. And that terrified me more than the lights ever had. That night, I locked myself inside and turned off every light, hoping darkness would break whatever connection the lake had formed with me. It didn't. The glow seeped through the curtains anyway, painting slow blue pulses across my walls like a heartbeat. My dog refused to stop barking, not at the door, but at the floor. I heard the ice crack then, not sharply, not violently. A long, stretching sound, like something carefully testing its limits. Against my better judgment, I pulled the curtain back just enough to look. The lights were no longer beneath the surface. They were inside the ice now, trapped midway, distorted and closer, like faces pressing against frosted glass. One light split into two. Another dimmed, then flared brighter, reacting when I stepped closer to the window. In my head, a thought appeared that didn't feel like mine. It's warmer down here. My knees buckled. I realized the lake wasn't calling everyone. It was calling me. I don't remember putting my boots on. I only remember standing outside, the cold biting through my coat as if it didn't belong to me anymore. The lake felt closer than it should have, like it had crept toward the house while I wasn't looking. Each step toward the ice made the lights brighten. They arranged themselves into a line leading away from shore, pulsing gently, encouraging. The ice beneath my boots felt solid, reassuring, too reassuring. I knew ice wasn't supposed to feel warm, but it did, faintly, disturbingly so. Halfway out, I stopped. The surface beneath me shifted, not cracking, but flexing. I looked down and saw something dark moving far below, dragging the lights with it, shaping them into curves that looked disturbingly like arms. The lake groaned again, deeper this time. Behind me, I heard Cal shouting my name from the shore, his voice cutting through the fog in my head. The lights flickered in irritation, and for the first time, they pulled. The pull wasn't violent. That was the worst part. It was gentle, patient, like hands guiding me forward rather than dragging me. My boots slid a few inches on their own, the ice humming softly beneath them. I couldn't feel my feet anymore. I couldn't feel much of anything except the certainty that if I went farther, I wouldn't come back. Cal kept shouting. He was closer now, his voice cracking with fear. Every time he called my name, the lights beneath the ice dimmed slightly, as if annoyed by the interruption. The dark shape below shifted, pressing upward, and the ice beneath my boots thinned to cloudy white. I dropped to my knees and slapped the surface, the cold snapping me back into myself. The lights surged angrily, flaring bright enough to hurt my eyes. For a moment, I saw shapes within them. Faces stretched and blurred, mouths open in silent pleas or promises. Then Cal grabbed my arm. The lights flickered violently, and the lake screamed. The ice shattered behind us as Cal dragged me back toward shore. Not beneath my feet, but where I would have been seconds later. Black water surged up, steaming in the cold air, swallowing the lights one by one as they vanished below the surface. The lake went silent after that. Too silent. We collapsed onto the snow, gasping, afraid to look back. When I finally did, the ice was already reforming, sealing itself smooth and unbroken, as if nothing had happened. No cracks, no lights, just endless white. Cal refused to let me stay another night. We packed what we could and left before sunrise. As we drove away, I felt the lake watching us. Not angry, not disappointed, patient. Weeks later, I started dreaming of blue light beneath glass, of warmth under cold. Sometimes I wake with wet footprints on my bedroom floor, leading nowhere. Lake Winnipeg doesn't chase what it wants. It waits until you're ready to come back. Weeks passed, but the memory of the lights never faded. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, imagination, or stress. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw the glow pulsing beneath the ice, just beyond reach, just out of sight. I couldn't sleep near windows without feeling the subtle tug of something below, something patient watching. One night, I woke to find faint scratches along the floorboards of my bedroom. Nothing else had moved, no door open, no wind. The scratches led toward the window, curling outward like fingers stretching toward the frozen lake in my mind. My dog growled low, back arched, staring at the floor. I grabbed him and slept on the couch. But the air felt heavier, as if the lake itself had followed me. I realized then that the lights weren't merely beneath the ice. They had learned to reach me, to touch me through space and memory, drawing me back slowly, gently, always toward that impossible blue glow. I moved south soon after, far from the lake, hoping distance would break whatever bond had formed. For months, I felt relief, until I started noticing little things. Subtle vibrations under my feet on certain nights, reflections in water that weren't mine, a pale blue light flickering at the edge of every frozen pond. It wasn't as intense as Lake Winnipeg, but unmistakable. Patient, waiting, remembering. I've stopped walking near lakes in winter. I've stopped trusting reflections. I check ice closely, even when it seems solid. And I always sleep with the curtains drawn. Sometimes, in dreams, I return to that frozen expanse. I step onto the ice, the lights pulsing beneath, coaxing me closer. I wake with my heart hammering, certain I almost went too far. The lake doesn't forgive curiosity. It doesn't need to. It only needs to wait. And it remembers. If you ever see a faint blue glow beneath ice, don't step closer. Whatever it is, it already knows your name. My name is Derek Lawson, and this happened to me when I was 28, living in a remote cabin deep in the Spruce Woods Provincial Forest. I had taken a job mapping old logging trails, which required months of isolation. I liked solitude until it started answering me back. The cabin was small, with a single wood stove and a loft I slept in. At first, nights were peaceful, filled with the crackle of fire and the whisper of wind through the pines. That all changed the third night. I woke to the sound of footsteps outside, heavy and deliberate, circling the cabin. I froze, thinking it was some wildlife, but the pattern was wrong. Too slow, too intentional. Then came the scratching at the door. Not nails on wood, but something larger, scraping in irregular, impossible rhythms. I grabbed my flashlight and peered into the darkness. Nothing moved, yet the sound continued, growing closer to the loft window. I wasn't alone. I tried calling out. "Who's there?" My voice cracked in the freezing night, swallowed by the forest. The scratching stopped immediately. Silence. Too quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, flashlight in hand. The snow was undisturbed. No footprints, nothing. Just deep forest and moonlight cutting through the spruces. I scanned the tree line, trying to convince myself it was imagination. That's when I noticed the shadows. They weren't moving like animals or humans. They stretched in impossible angles, bending across tree trunks like darkness had a mind of its own. Then I heard a low hiss, wet and gurgling, coming from behind the cabin. I spun around. Nothing. But the sound persisted, circling me, moving faster than I could track. My heart hammered. My instincts screamed. I ran back inside, bolted the door, and prayed it was gone. The scratching resumed, this time along the loft walls, slow, deliberate, patient. Something was inside my cabin, or wanted to be. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin made my stomach twist. I kept my flashlight close, swinging it across the walls, across the loft, searching for anything moving. But nothing appeared. Just shadows stretching, bending, curling where they shouldn't. Around midnight, the temperature dropped sharply, despite the wood stove roaring below me. My breath hung thick in the air, frost forming on the loft railing. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft at first, barely audible, almost like the wind. But it repeated, clearer each time, forming words I didn't understand. I froze. My dog, who usually slept curled at my feet, growled low, hackles raised. I climbed down the ladder slowly, hands shaking. The whispering turned into scraping again. Fingernails, claws, something dragging along the wooden floor below. When I reached the cabin main room, I saw faint footprints forming in the snow dust that had drifted through the cracks near the door. They didn't lead outside. They led straight toward the stove. Something, or someone, was watching me from inside. I tried to call Mark, my supervisor, but the phone had no signal. The forest swallowed everything. The whispering and scraping intensified, echoing as if the cabin itself were alive, expanding and contracting around me. I grabbed an axe from the corner and moved slowly toward the stove, imagining the worst. When I reached it, I saw nothing. But the metal door of the stove rattled lightly, like someone or something was breathing inside it. I stepped back, heart hammering. The shadows around me shifted, forming shapes that looked like faces pressed against walls, distorted and impossible. Then the window behind me fogged, though it wasn't cold enough for condensation. Faint claw marks appeared, dragging down from the top of the glass. My dog barked and ran toward the door, but froze mid-step, staring into the darkness outside as the snow began moving unnaturally, sliding across the porch as if alive. I knew then the forest wasn't just outside. It was inside. It had waited for me. I couldn't stay inside any longer. The shadows were moving too deliberately now, curling over the loft railing, sliding along the floor, whispering in a language my mind refused to translate. I grabbed my coat, my flashlight, and slowly stepped outside, hoping fresh air would break the cabin's grip. The forest was impossibly silent. The snow underfoot felt wrong, almost springy, like it had a pulse of its own. The trees leaned inward slightly, shadows pooling beneath their branches as if they were watching me walk. I noticed footprints in the snow leading away from the cabin. They weren't mine, and they weren't human. They had too many joints, too long, dragging claws that left deep gouges. I tried to run, but every step seemed slower than the last. The whispering followed me into the forest, now louder, forming partial words. My name, my fears, questions I didn't understand. I realized with horror that it wasn't just the cabin. The forest itself had come alive, waiting for me to move too far. I stumbled into a small clearing, heart hammering, and froze. The shadows were thick here, stretching across the snow in unnatural angles, twisting like smoke. Then I saw them, figures emerging from the trees. Not fully human, not fully animal. Their limbs elongated, eyes reflecting dim amber light. They didn't move like living creatures. They moved like nightmares shaped into something physical. I tried to shine my flashlight on them, but it flickered, dying, leaving me in half-light. Their whispers grew louder, circling me, pressing into my mind. One stepped closer, tilting its head unnaturally, and I felt a cold rush sweep across my body, like the forest was inhaling through me. I ran blindly, snow crunching underfoot, dodging branches that seemed to reach out, scratching my coat. The whispers followed, now shouting fragments of words I couldn't understand. Every time I looked back, the figures seemed to split, multiplying, blocking every path back to the cabin. I realized then that leaving wasn't an option. The forest wouldn't let me go. I crashed through a thicket of trees, branches whipping my face and arms. Every sound I made, the snapping of twigs, my ragged breathing, seemed amplified, echoing like a drum in a vast, empty hall. Yet the whispers didn't fade. They grew sharper, faster, circling me from every direction. Then I saw movement in the snow ahead. A faint path, covered lightly with pine needles and frost. It led toward a frozen stream, its surface dark and slick under the moonlight. My instincts screamed to avoid it. But the figures were closing in, their elongated limbs gliding over snow with impossible speed. I ran onto the ice, flashlight bouncing across the uneven surface. The whispers became cries, sharp, urgent, echoing across the frozen water. For a moment, I thought I had outpaced them. Then the ice beneath me creaked, shifting slightly as if warning me. A shadow moved beneath the ice, mirroring my every step. I stumbled and fell, heart hammering. I realized then the forest didn't just want to chase me. It wanted me trapped. The ice cracked sharply under my weight, sending shivers through my legs. The shadow beneath me twisted, coiling like smoke, and the whispers rose to a deafening pitch. I scrambled to the edge, hauling myself onto the bank, gasping. When I looked back, the figures were standing at the water's edge, frozen, watching me with eyes that glowed faint amber in the darkness. I ran blindly, following the path I thought led to the cabin. The forest seemed to stretch, trees leaning closer, shadows extending unnaturally, forcing me off course. I tripped over roots, falling into a small ditch, and for a second, I thought I was done. Then I remembered the cabin, its faint, warm light, burning steadily through the darkness like a lifeline. Summoning every ounce of strength, I clawed my way back toward it, the whispers behind me now chaotic, almost furious. When I reached the cabin door, I slammed it shut and bolted it, collapsing against it. The forest waited outside. Patient, hungry, I stayed inside the cabin the rest of the night, too afraid to move, listening to the whispers fade into a low, patient silence. Morning came, weak and gray, and the forest looked calm, normal, even friendly. But I knew better. The traces of the shadows remained. Small gouges in the porch boards, claw marks along the window frame, and the faint impression of elongated footprints pressed into the snow near the door. I packed my things hastily, refusing to stay another night. As I walked the path toward my truck, the forest seemed to watch. Every tree limb swaying, casting shadows that stretched unnaturally long, following me. My flashlight flickered with the echoes of whispers that were no longer audible, but I could feel their presence, patient, waiting for nightfall. Even from a safe distance, I knew the cabin would never let go of what it claimed. Spruce Woods wasn't just trees and snow, it was alive, and it remembered the names of everyone who dared trespass. I never returned to the Spruce Woods cabin. Years later, I drive past the area in daylight, hoping the distance dulls the memory. But I can still feel it. Every time the wind shifts through pines, I hear faint whispers, stretching and curling like smoke. The trees, even in photographs, appear to lean slightly toward the path I once ran, like they are alive in subtle ways that cameras can't capture. At night, I dream of elongated shadows crawling through snow, following the path from the cabin, reaching, waiting. Sometimes I wake with faint scratches along my arms, small, shallow, impossible to explain. The cabin is gone from the woods now, burned or dismantled. Locals won't say. But the forest hasn't forgotten me. Spruce Woods keeps its secrets, and it keeps its victims alive in memory. The shadows are patient. They always wait for someone new to wander too close, someone to answer when the whispers call. If you ever find yourself lost in the Spruce Woods, remember, some cabins are meant to be avoided. My name is Ethan Ross, And this happened when I was 29, hunting alone in Whiteshell Provincial Park during the late winter of 2019. I loved the solitude. Just me, my rifle, and endless snow-covered wilderness. The park felt alive, quiet but full of secrets. I should have listened to those secrets. I set up camp near a frozen creek, miles from the nearest road. That first night, after gutting my first deer, I heard something moving in the trees. Soft, deliberate footsteps, not quite human. I froze, scanning the moonlit forest with my headlamp. Nothing. The only sound was snow crunching under the weight of something I couldn't see. Then I noticed footprints near my camp, large, humanoid, but with elongated toes, sinking unnaturally deep into the snow. They didn't match any animal I knew. They circled my tent, careful, almost cautious, as if studying me. My rifle felt heavier than ever, and I prayed it would be enough. Something, or someone, was out there, and it wasn't human. I stayed awake most of the night, rifle across my lap, listening. Every crunch of snow, every snap of a branch made me flinch. The forest seemed alive, bending and stretching unnaturally under the moonlight. By 2 a.m., I heard something. Low, guttural breathing, moving around the edge of my camp. I shined my flashlight toward the sound. A shadow darted between the trees, too quick to follow. It wasn't a deer or a wolf. Its shape was humanoid, but twisted. Limbs longer than normal, movement jerky yet deliberate, like a puppet on invisible strings. I fired a warning shot, and the figure vanished. I thought the worst was over. Then I heard it whisper my name, clear, cold, and deep, coming from all directions at once. It wasn't a voice I recognized. And when I stepped outside to check, the footprints in the snow had multiplied, lining a path that led directly into the dense forest, deeper than any human could survive, alone in that cold. I followed the footprints at first, curiosity and fear battling in my chest. The snow was deep, and each step felt heavier than the last, as if the forest itself resisted my movement. The prints led me through a narrow corridor of spruce trees, twisting deeper into the wilderness, farther than I had intended to go. The shadows around me grew thicker, stretching unnaturally in the pale moonlight. I could hear faint breathing now, slow and deliberate, circling me from unseen angles. Every time I paused, the sound paused too, like it was studying me. My flashlight flickered, and in those brief moments of darkness, I swore I saw the figure closer, just beyond the trees, tilting its head as if amused. A low growl erupted from somewhere behind me, making me spin around. Nothing. Only more footprints, fresh and impossibly large, appearing in a circle around me, forming a trap I could feel but not see. I realized then the forest wasn't just inhabited. It was hunting. Panic set in. I ran blindly, crashing through low branches, snow sticking to my clothes, boots struggling through powder. The footprints seemed to multiply, following me, intersecting, always leading deeper into the forest. The whispers came back, my name repeated in a chilling monotone, now mixed with guttural growls. Then I stumbled upon a frozen clearing. The snow here was strangely smooth, except for dozens of footprints, some human, some elongated and impossible. In the center was a circle, faintly glowing under the moonlight, like frost had been burned into intricate patterns. The air vibrated subtly, making my skin crawl. I froze. The figure stepped into the clearing, fully visible now. Its limbs were impossibly long, torso twisted at unnatural angles, skin pale and stretched, eyes glowing faint amber. It moved toward me, slowly, deliberately, as if enjoying the chase more than the kill. I raised my rifle, hands shaking, realizing this was no ordinary predator. This was something that had been waiting for me. I fired a single shot. The figure flinched, but didn't stop. The bullet seemed to pass through it, making a hollow, echoing sound that froze me in place. Panic replaced fear as I realized this creature wasn't bound by normal rules. It tilted its head, a faint whisper escaping its mouth. Closer. The footprints around the clearing shifted while I watched, rearranging themselves into a line leading away toward a dark grove of trees. I felt compelled to follow, even as rational thought screamed at me to run. My boots sank deep into the snow, dragging me forward slowly, unwillingly. Branches reached down, snagging my coat and scraping my arms. But the creature didn't touch me. It simply hovered at the edge of vision, patient, silent, exuding an oppressive weight that pressed into my chest and skull. Every step I took toward that grove felt like a decision I couldn't undo, a path I had no right to walk. Somewhere deep in the forest, it waited. Calculating, I reached the grove, branches cracking underfoot, frost shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The whispers intensified, echoing around me, now forming phrases I didn't understand but felt intrinsically threatening. The creature appeared closer now, following silently, always just outside my flashlight beam. Its eyes glowed faint amber, unblinking, reflecting the snow beneath. I tried to stop, tried to catch my breath, but the snow felt thicker here, sucking at my boots like it wanted to hold me. The footprints split, forming two paths around me, circling, trapping me in the grove's center. The whispers became a low chant, rhythmic, as if the forest itself were speaking through it. Suddenly, something slammed into my shoulder, hard enough to knock me forward. I hit the snow, rifle skidding away. I scrambled to retrieve it, heart hammering, only to find the footprints converging on me from all directions. I realized then that the hunter of Whiteshell didn't need to touch me. The forest did its work, bending, guiding, trapping, making me part of the hunt itself. I scrambled to my feet, chest heaving, and tried to follow the footprints leading out of the grove. The snow resisted me, thick and sticky, slowing every movement. The whispers grew louder, almost urgent, calling my name over and over, taunting me. I dared to glance back. The figure stood at the edge of the trees, perfectly still, but its limbs bent in ways no humans could, watching me. Branches lashed at my face, snagging my jacket, and the air grew heavier, making each breath a struggle. Somehow, the footprints shifted ahead, guiding me like a compass, dragging me further into the heart of the forest. Every instinct screamed to run the other way, but it was as if invisible hands forced my feet forward. I tripped over a root and fell hard, sliding into a small hollow, snow packing around me. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence. Then, I felt it. The forest watching, the shadows waiting, patient, hungry, knowing I was trapped and alone. I crawled to my feet, rifle in hand, desperate, terrified. The forest seemed alive, bending subtly, shadows stretching unnaturally to block escape routes. I realized then that the whispers were more than sounds. They were commands, urging me toward something I couldn't see. The footprints ahead pulsed faintly in the snow, guiding me. Suddenly, a sharp movement caught my eye. One of the figures darted through the trees, too fast to track, limbs bending unnaturally, almost fluid. My heart raced, and my mind screamed at me to fire. I hesitated, and in that moment, the figure vanished, leaving only silence and snow disturbed in impossible patterns. I ran blindly, following the footprints, guided by instinct. The forest narrowed, funnels of snow-laden trees forcing me toward a small clearing. At the center, the snow had been trampled into a circle, faintly glowing, like a stage prepared for a ritual. I froze, realizing I wasn't running toward safety. I was running into the creature's trap. I stood frozen at the edge of the glowing circle, rifle shaking in my hands. The footprints around it shifted again, forming lines that led in every direction, impossible to follow. The shadows in the trees seemed to pulse, bending unnaturally, as if the forest itself breathed and watched. The whispers returned, louder now, urgent, commanding, echoing in my skull. I realized with a sinking heart that I was the prey, and the forest had orchestrated this hunt from the beginning. The elongated figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the circle. It tilted its head, and its eyes glowed faint amber in the dim light. The whispers now felt physical, pressing into my chest and throat, slowing my breath, making every step heavier. My mind screamed at me to run, but the snow resisted. Every instinct told me to flee, yet I felt drawn, pulled toward the center of that circle, as if the forest itself demanded I submit. I understood then. Escaping was only possible if I played by the forest's rules. I stepped into the circle, heart hammering, and the snow seemed to pulse beneath my boots. The whispers intensified, now forming words I didn't understand, but felt intrinsically threatening. I lowered my rifle, understanding instinctively that firing would make things worse. The figure advanced slowly, its movements fluid, limbs bending impossibly. My dog, trembling beside me, growled low but didn't move. Suddenly, the circle flared with faint amber light, and the shadows withdrew into the trees. The figure stopped at the edge of the glow, staring at me, and then, without warning, it vanished. The forest fell silent, except for my ragged breathing and the crunch of snow underfoot. The footprints remained in strange formations, fading gradually, leaving no trail to follow. I ran back to my truck as quickly as I could, never looking back. I left the forest behind, but I can still feel its presence, stretching, watching, patient. Whiteshell doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. The forest always waits for the next hunter to wander too far. My name is Clara Jennings, and this happened to me during the winter of 2020, while volunteering as a wildlife researcher in Duck Mountain Provincial Park. I loved studying the habits of animals in isolation, but what I encountered that year changed everything I believed about the forest. I'd set up a small research cabin near a frozen wetland, tracking wolves and moose. The nights were long, the wind sharp, and the snow endless. On the third night, I noticed footprints outside my cabin. Not animal tracks, but human-like, with wide, heavy steps. They led around the cabin in circles and stopped abruptly at my window. I froze, my breath visible in the cold air, heart racing. At first, I thought it was another researcher, but no one else was allowed in this sector of the park. The footprints appeared again the next morning, fresh, circling the cabin like a ritual. Something, or someone, was watching me. By the fourth night, I heard whispers carried on the wind, calling my name softly, over and over, blending with the creaking of the old pines. I tried to dismiss it as imagination, the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But the next evening, the sounds intensified. A scraping came at the door, slow, deliberate, heavy. I gripped my flashlight, shining it across the clearing, but nothing moved. Only the tracks in the snow remained, as if the intruder had melted into the night. Then I heard it. A low, guttural groan, like wood bending under enormous weight. The wind shifted, carrying faint whispers, my name, my fears, questions I didn't understand. I rushed outside, flashlights sweeping the clearing, but it was empty. Yet the tracks led away into the dark forest, disappearing abruptly, like they had never existed. I returned to the cabin, shaken, heart hammering. My dog, normally calm, cowered in the corner, ears back, growling at shadows I couldn't see. That night, I slept fully dressed, with the door locked. But the whispers never stopped. They circled my mind, persistent, patient, promising something I couldn't escape. The following morning, I tried to rationalize what was happening. I double-checked the perimeter, made sure all the locks were secure, and even left my flashlight on overnight. Yet, when I woke, the tracks had returned, circling the cabin once more. This time, they were accompanied by deep, dragging marks, like heavy boots or claws scraping the snow. I stepped outside, trembling, trying to follow them. But they led nowhere. The forest beyond my cabin seemed denser, darker, as if the trees themselves had shifted while I slept. The wind carried faint whispers, echoing in my ears, growing louder when I moved closer to the tree line. I could swear I glimpsed a figure in the shadows, hunched over, dragging something behind it, its movements jerky, unnatural. I ran back inside, shutting the door violently. My mind screamed that I was imagining it, yet every instinct in my body told me otherwise. Something was out there, watching, waiting, and it had marked me as its next target. Yes, that night, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees like distant voices. The cabin groaned under the pressure, the door rattling with each gust. The whispers returned, now louder, repeating my name with a deep, guttural undertone. I gripped my rifle tightly, but even the cold steel felt insufficient against what I couldn't see. Suddenly, a shadow passed across the window, long, thin, distorted. My dog barked furiously, hair standing on end. I ran to the door, swung it open, and shined my flashlight into the forest. Nothing. But then, behind a thick cluster of pines, I saw it. Tall, hunched, dragging what looked like a heavy sack across the snow. Its elongated limbs bent at unnatural angles, and its eyes glowed faint amber, fixed directly on me. I slammed the door shut, locking it again, my hands shaking. The creature didn't move, didn't leave. It waited, patient, outside the cabin, and the whispers grew louder, seeping into my mind. I realized then, the ghostly trapper wasn't just haunting the forest, it was haunting me. I decided I couldn't stay in the cabin another night. The whispers were unbearable, clawing at my mind. I packed my essentials, food, rifle, and a few blankets, and prepared to hike out at first light. The snow was deep, and my boots sank with every step, leaving a trail of human footprints alongside the impossible tracks. As I followed the faint path toward the main road, the dragging marks returned, appearing suddenly in the snow beside me. I glanced around and glimpsed the hunched figure moving behind the trees, always just out of clear sight. Its elongated limbs shifted unnaturally as it followed, dragging what I assumed was some kind of trap or sack through the snow. The whispers became more insistent, now mingling with guttural groans and scraping noises, forcing me to keep moving. I realized this was no ordinary forest haunting. The ghostly trapper was guiding me, or perhaps forcing me, toward something I couldn't see. Toward a part of the forest I had no intention of exploring. The forest seemed alive, branches twisting subtly, casting shadows that moved against the early light. Every step I took felt manipulated, as though the snow itself guided me along the path. The whispers escalated, echoing in my ears like a chorus of unseen voices. I stumbled into a small clearing, and my heart sank. The snow was trampled into a large circle, strange runes faintly carved into the icy surface. The figure appeared at the edge, dragging the heavy sack behind it, amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It didn't move quickly, just glided closer, patient, deliberate. I could feel its attention on me, suffocating, pushing my thoughts, weighing my will. I raised my rifle instinctively, but the forest groaned around me as if warning me. The creature paused, tilted its head, and the whispers receded just enough for me to breathe. I knew I couldn't fire. Any aggressive action might provoke it, and the forest itself. I stepped carefully, trying to understand its intentions, but every instinct screamed to flee. I inched closer to the circle, every step crunching in the snow, every breath fogging in the cold air. The forest seemed to hold its breath, branches frozen in place, shadows stretching unnaturally toward me. The hunched figure remained at the edge of the circle, dragging the heavy sack slowly, deliberately. Its elongated limbs bent in impossible angles, but it never made a wrong move. The whispers swirled around me, echoing in my mind, repeating fragments of my own thoughts and fears back to me. Panic and dread battled curiosity. I couldn't turn away, but every instinct screamed danger. The runes in the snow glimmered faintly under the early light, pulsating as if alive, guiding me toward the center. I realized then that the trapper wasn't hunting me in a traditional sense. It wanted something deeper, my attention, my fear, my submission. I raised my rifle slightly, shaking, heart hammering. But the figure made no move, waiting, testing me, its amber eyes unblinking. The wind rose suddenly, swirling snow and mist into a low, eerie fog. I could barely see the figure now, but the amber glow of its eyes pierced through the haze, fixed intently on me. The whispers surged, now repeating my name in a harsh, guttural tone, like the forest itself had become a voice of judgment. I took a step backward and slipped on icy snow, falling hard. The dragging sound of the sack grew louder, closer, moving around me in patterns I couldn't predict. Every branch I passed seemed to grab at my clothing, tugging me off balance. My rifle slid from my hands, landing out of reach. The circle's runes pulsed brighter, casting ghostly light across the clearing. I realized that this wasn't just a ghostly figure. It was a ritual, a binding of me to the forest in some way I couldn't comprehend. I felt trapped, like the forest had become a cage, and the trapper was the jailer. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, every nerve screaming to run. The figure stayed at the edge of the glowing runes, unmoving, dragging its heavy sack across the snow with slow, deliberate precision. The whispers filled my head, repeating my fears, memories, and regrets, intertwining them into a cacophony that made my vision blur. I realized then that the creature wasn't just a hunter, it was a collector, marking me, testing me, examining every reaction. I tried to take a step back, but the snow beneath my boots shifted strangely, forming subtle ridges that forced me forward, guiding me back toward the circle. The forest itself seemed alive, each tree a silent sentinel, bending slightly as if to close the path behind me. I raised my arms, hands shaking, pleading silently for it to stop, to leave me be. The figure tilted its head, amber eyes boring into mine, and for a brief instant, I felt its gaze penetrate beyond my body, into my very mind. Then it slowly withdrew, retreating into the dense trees, leaving the circle glowing faintly in eerie silence. I ran without looking back, stumbling through deep snow, the forest eerily silent except for the crunch of my boots. The glowing runes faded behind me, and the figure had vanished completely, leaving only the disturbed snow and the lingering sense of being watched. My dog ran ahead, barking occasionally. but even he seemed unsettled, ears back, fur bristling. When I finally reached the edge of the trees and the path back to my vehicle, I collapsed, shivering, exhausted, unable to comprehend what I had just survived. The whispers had vanished, but the forest's weight lingered, pressing on my chest even in open daylight. I never returned to that sector of Duck Mountain, and I warned others to avoid the area entirely, though few believed me. Even now, years later, when the wind shifts through the pines or snow drifts over empty fields, I feel it, watching, waiting, patient. The ghostly trapper doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget, and it always claims its hunters in the end. My name is Dylan Hart, and this happened in the summer of 2018 during a solo fishing trip on the northern shore of Lake Winnipeg. I loved the solitude of the lake, the endless water reflecting the sky, the sound of waves lapping against my small boat. But solitude can be deceiving, and that summer, it nearly cost me my life. I had anchored my boat near a secluded inlet, planning to fish until dusk. The air was still, unusually quiet for a summer evening. That's when I saw him, a man standing on the shore, tall and thin, wearing tattered clothes that looked decades old. He held a fishing rod, but his line never moved. I blinked, and he was closer, then closer still, though I hadn't seen him approach. I tried calling out, but no sound left my throat. My heart raced as he slowly raised a hand, pointing directly at me. Something about his eyes, empty, black, yet glowing faintly, sent a chill down my spine. I gripped my oars and tried to paddle away, but the water around the boat seemed unnaturally heavy, resisting movement. The figure remained perfectly still, watching me, his eyes never leaving mine. A low hum began to fill the air, like the echo of wind over ice, though it was summer and the water was warm. I glanced down at my tackle box. My fishing gear had moved on its own, scattered across the deck. Panic surged as I tried to reach the oars again, and then the line of the Phantom's rod whipped toward me. It snapped the water as if striking something invisible, and a sudden coldness filled the air, freezing my arms in place. I realized this wasn't just a man, nor a ghost of a fisherman. It was something older, something bound to the lake, waiting for anyone foolish enough to fish in its waters. My only choice was to survive until nightfall. But I wasn't sure I could. I tried to steady my breathing, but the lake around me seemed alive, waves moving against my oars even though there was no wind. The figure on shore hadn't moved, yet with each glance, he seemed a little closer. My heart raced as the low hum grew louder, vibrating through the boat, through the water, and even through my bones. Then I saw something terrifying, a faint outline of shapes beneath the surface, like long skeletal hands reaching up toward the boat. The phantom fisherman lifted his rod slowly, and the line glowed faintly, snaking across the water as if alive. My instincts screamed at me to jump into the boat, to paddle furiously, but my arms refused to obey. The water around the boat churned unnaturally, waves slapping the sides with deliberate force, almost pushing me toward shore. The figure's black eyes gleamed brighter, watching, testing, knowing my fear. I realized this was no ordinary ghost. It was the guardian of something ancient, something hungry in the depths of Lake Winnipeg. I gripped the sides of the boat, trying to resist being pulled toward the shore. The skeletal shapes beneath the water reached higher, undulating in rhythm with the glow of the Phantom's line. Each wave that struck the boat felt purposeful, almost malicious, pushing me closer to the water's edge. My dog, normally calm on trips like this, whimpered and barked, crouching low in the stern. I tried shouting, demanding the figure leave me alone, but my voice was swallowed by the low hum that now filled the entire inlet. The phantom fisherman took a step forward, and the water around him rippled unnaturally, reflecting his glowing black eyes in every wave. For a brief moment, I thought I saw other figures, ghostly shapes of long-dead fishermen lining the far shore, silently observing. Panic overtook me. I realized the lake itself was part of the trap, and this guardian wasn't just a watcher. It controlled everything around it. Every instinct screamed that I had to get out. But I didn't know if escape was even possible. I tried to paddle, but the water resisted every stroke, as though the lake itself had grown heavier, trying to pull me under. The skeletal hands beneath the surface writhed, forming ghostly shapes that mirrored the fisherman's movements. Each time I moved, they mirrored me, forcing me to confront a terror I couldn't escape. My dog whimpered, fur standing on end, refusing to move. The phantom fisherman raised his glowing rod, and the line struck the water like a whip, sending a shockwave through the boat. I was thrown backward, splashing icy water over myself, and my rifle slid into the lake with a muffled splash. The black eyes fixed on me, unblinking, burning with a patience and malice I'd never felt before. I realized that no matter how fast I paddled, I couldn't outrun him. The lake was part of him, and the spirits beneath the surface obeyed his will. I had to think, had to survive. But I had no idea how to outsmart a guardian of something that had ruled these waters for decades, unseen and patient. I scrambled to grab my oars again, splashing through icy water, and the skeletal forms twisted violently beneath me, creating waves that threatened to capsize the boat. The phantom fisherman stepped closer to the water's edge, rod glowing brighter, casting faint amber reflections across the lake. I noticed faint outlines of old, broken boats scattered along the distant shore, relics of people who had underestimated him before me. The whispers returned, echoing across the water, speaking in unintelligible tones. But somehow I understood the meaning. Leave or join them. My instincts screamed to flee, but the lake wouldn't let me. Every stroke felt like pushing through a weight that wasn't water, as though the spirits themselves resisted my escape. Then, a sudden movement. One of the skeletal hands burst through the surface, reaching toward me, fingers long and impossibly thin. I lashed out with the oar, breaking through the ice-cold surface, and the hand recoiled. The phantom fisherman tilted his head, watching, knowing I had barely survived this encounter. I paddled frantically, arms aching, every stroke fighting against the unnatural pull of the lake. The skeletal hands below thrashed violently, sending waves slamming into the boat. My dog whimpered, pressed against my leg, refusing to move. The phantom fisherman remained on the shore, motionless, glowing eyes tracking my every move. He didn't need to chase me. The lake itself did. Suddenly, the fishing line shot across the water like a living thing, wrapping around my oar and yanking it out of my hands. I stumbled, nearly falling into the icy lake, and the skeletal forms surged toward the boat, their thin, elongated fingers scraping the hull. I realized that the lake wasn't just a body of water. It was a conduit for him, and the spirits beneath were extensions of his will. I had to think quickly. I scanned the shoreline and noticed a narrow channel leading out of the inlet, partially hidden by reeds. If I could reach it, I might have a chance. But every second felt like a lifetime under his gaze. I aimed the boat toward the channel, paddling with everything I had left. The water resisted, waves slamming into me, skeletal fingers grazing the hull. The wind carried the low hum of whispers, echoing in my mind, urging me to stop, to submit. I forced my gaze on the channel, the only potential escape. The phantom fisherman raised his rod, the line now glowing intensely, almost like a whip of amber light. The skeletal form surged, reaching higher, trying to block my path. I shouted, screamed, anything to break the hold of the whispers, but my voice was swallowed by the lake's unnatural stillness. As I neared the channel, the water calmed slightly, as if granting me one last chance. I realized then that he wasn't here to kill me. Not yet. He was testing me, measuring my fear, seeing if I could survive the trial of the lake. If I failed, the spirits below would drag me into the depths, and I would join the countless others who had underestimated the phantom fishermen of Lake Winnipeg. I pushed harder, paddling with every ounce of strength, ignoring the icy spray and the whispers that clawed at my mind. The skeletal hands thrashed violently, but I could see the channel ahead, narrow and dimly lit by the moon reflecting off the water. My heart pounded as the line from the phantom fisherman lashed at me, grazing my arm and sending shocks of icy pain through my body. The boat lurched violently, and I lost my balance, nearly tipping over. My dog barked, snapping me back to focus, and I paddled desperately toward the channel, ignoring the drag of the lake beneath me. The skeletal figures receded slightly, almost reluctantly, and I realized the phantom wasn't trying to physically stop me. He was testing my will to survive. Finally, I cleared the narrow passage, and the lake behind me calmed. The whispers faded, and the water smoothed as if nothing had happened. But I knew the phantom fisherman was still watching, waiting, patient, and that Lake Winnipeg would always remember me. By the time I reached open water, my arms burned, my teeth chattered from the cold, and my mind raced with disbelief. The phantom fishermen and the skeletal shapes were gone, yet I could feel their presence lingering, a cold weight pressing in the back of my mind. My dog collapsed on the boat floor, exhausted and shivering, but alive. I rowed back to the main shore as quickly as I could, avoiding the inlets and shallow coves. Even in daylight, I couldn't shake the memory of the glowing black eyes, the whispering hum, and the unnatural movements of the spirits beneath the water. I swore never to return to that part of Lake Winnipeg. Years later, I still fish, but never alone, never at dusk, and never in quiet, isolated coves. I can still feel him, watching from the far shore, waiting for the next fisherman foolish enough to challenge him. Some guardians of the lake are patient, and some spirits never forget. My name is Ethan Parker, and this happened in the late summer of 2019, when I took a temporary job harvesting wheat near Morris, Manitoba. I had spent most of my life in the city and thought the wide-open fields would be peaceful, a perfect escape from the chaos. I was wrong. The first night I stayed in the small farmhouse provided by the farm owner, I noticed strange movements in the fields beyond the porch light. Shadows darted between the golden stalks, unnaturally fast, too fluid for any animal I knew. I chalked it up to fatigue at first, but the unease didn't leave me. By the third night, I was working late, harvesting alone in the fading sunlight, when I saw a figure. Tall, thin, completely black, like a silhouette, standing perfectly still at the edge of the field. I froze. It didn't move. Yet somehow I felt its gaze boring into me, pressing against my mind. Something about it made the air heavy, as if the wind itself had stopped. I kept glancing over my shoulder as I worked, but the shadow didn't move closer. It stayed at the field's edge, silent, still. I tried to ignore it, pretending it was a trick of the fading light, but every instinct screamed that it wasn't. Later that night, I woke to scratching noises outside my window. The wind had picked up, Yet the wheat beyond the porch swayed in unnatural patterns, as if forming shapes I couldn't fully make out. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it toward the field. The silhouette was closer, almost blending with the stalks, but the outline was unmistakable. I swear its head tilted, just slightly, as if observing me with a patience that was impossible for a human. The farmhouse suddenly felt small and suffocating. The floorboards creaked beneath me, but I knew I was alone. My heart pounded as I realized that I wasn't dealing with a trick of shadows or fatigue. Whatever this was, it was intelligent, patient, and aware of me. The next day, I tried to rationalize everything. Exhaustion, paranoia, maybe even city nerves. But as I worked through the endless wheat, I kept catching glimpses of movement in the corner of my eye. The shadow was always there, always watching, even when I convinced myself it wasn't. By late afternoon, the wind picked up, rustling the wheat into waves that seemed to move with purpose. That's when I noticed footprints. Not human, but deep impressions, wide and irregular, cutting through the soft soil between the rows. They weren't mine, and no one else had been near the field. They led in a straight line toward the farmhouse, stopping just shy of the porch. My stomach twisted. I considered leaving immediately, but the farm owner expected results. I had no choice but to finish my shift. Though every step felt heavy, every glance toward the edge of the field made my heart leap. The silhouette didn't move, just waited. Patient, almost pleased. Night fell, and I stayed awake in the farmhouse, unable to ignore the presence outside. The wind carried strange whispers through the wheat, almost like voices, low and distant, but repeating my name. I tried to convince myself it was imagination. Yet my dog growled constantly at the windows, fur bristling. Around midnight, the silhouette reappeared, just beyond the porch light, completely still. My breath caught in my chest as I noticed details I hadn't before. The shadow was featureless, perfectly black, yet it seemed to absorb the light around it, the wheat stalks bending away as it moved slightly. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs refused to obey. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it at the field. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the golden wheat swaying unnaturally. The figure didn't flinch. I realized then that this entity wasn't bound by the laws of the natural world. It existed to watch, to terrify, and perhaps to trap anyone who dared linger too long in these fields. The following morning, I decided to confront the fear rather than hide from it. I stepped out into the golden wheat with my camera and flashlight, determined to capture proof of what had been tormenting me. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the fields. But even daylight didn't lessen the unease that settled in my chest. I walked cautiously toward the far edge of the field, where the shadow had been appearing. The stalks swayed unnaturally, forming vague humanoid shapes in the morning mist. Suddenly, I froze. The silhouette emerged from the wheat, taller than before, its featureless form completely black, yet impossibly solid. It didn't move quickly, but the air around it seemed to vibrate with an unnatural energy. I raised my camera, hands shaking, snapping pictures, but the figure remained, watching, patient. Then, as if sensing my fear, it shifted slightly, and the entire wheat field seemed to ripple, a wave moving through the stalks that made me stagger backward. The shadow wasn't just in the field, it was the field itself. I backed away, heart racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Every instinct screamed that I was in danger. Yet the figure did nothing aggressive. It simply stood, observing, patient. The whispers returned, low and distorted, echoing through the stalks like wind over hollow bones. I noticed then that the footprints I had seen earlier were again visible, circling the farmhouse and vanishing into the wheat. They were deeper now, as though something heavier had walked them, but no one was there. The shadow followed every movement I made, staying at the very edge of my vision, impossible to fully confront without fear consuming me. Desperation overtook curiosity. I ran back to the farmhouse, the wheat stalks brushing against me like icy fingers. Once inside, I slammed the door, panting, my camera still in hand, hoping the photographs might provide some clarity. But even as I reviewed the images, the silhouette remained featureless, its presence almost tangible through the lens, mocking me with patience I couldn't comprehend. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the farmhouse, every rustle in the wheat outside made my heart race. The silhouette returned, appearing at the edge of the porch light, just like before. My dog growled low in the corner, refusing to move closer to the windows. I realized then that this was no ordinary haunting. The shadow didn't just observe, it tested patience, measured fear, and controlled the wheat itself, bending it around its presence. I stepped onto the porch, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The wheat stalks swayed unnaturally, forming vague shapes that reminded me of human figures, frozen in silent torment. The shadow didn't move, yet I felt as if the air itself was pressing down on me, urging me to retreat. Every instinct screamed danger, but I needed to understand it. Slowly, I edged closer to the field, noting the oppressive stillness around the farmhouse. Even as I approached, the shadow remained at the edge, patient, waiting. It was more than a figure. It was the embodiment of the fields themselves, watching for anyone foolish enough to linger. I knew then that leaving the farmhouse wasn't an option. The shadow would follow, guiding me or punishing me. I decided to stay awake all night, watching, waiting, hoping for a sign of its intentions. The wind carried whispers, low and distorted, weaving between the stalks and the farmhouse. My camera lay on the table, but I didn't dare move closer to retrieve it. Around midnight, a wave of cold passed through the porch, and I saw the silhouette step slightly forward, though the wheat didn't rustle around it. Its presence felt heavier now, oppressive, almost like gravity pressing against my chest. I felt trapped, suffocated, aware that the fields themselves could close in and swallow me whole. I kept my eyes on it, unwilling to blink, unwilling to turn away. The shadow didn't attack, didn't speak. It simply waited, patient and eternal, an embodiment of the wheat fields themselves, a sentinel for something I couldn't understand. That night, I realized that the silhouette wasn't bound by the rules of the natural world. It belonged to the fields, and the fields belonged to it. As dawn approached, the shadow began to fade, retreating slowly toward the far edge of the field. I watched it go, but my relief was tempered by the knowledge that it wasn't gone. It was patient, biding its time. The wheat stalks that had moved unnaturally now swayed gently in the morning breeze, but the impression of something watching remained etched in my mind. I stepped outside cautiously, the frost-tipped wheat crunching under my boots. I could see faint traces of deep footprints circling the farmhouse, fading into the field. My camera, left on the porch, showed nothing but empty stalks in the photographs, the silhouette gone. But I knew better. The shadow didn't leave evidence the way humans do. It moved through dimensions I couldn't perceive, always near, always waiting for its next target. That day, I packed my belongings and left. I never returned, and I warned the farm owner to avoid the far edge of the fields after sunset. But I know the shadow waits, patient, eternal, a guardian of the wheat, and perhaps something far older than the land itself. Even now, years later, I feel its presence whenever I think of those fields. The wheat waves in the wind, and I swear I see it, just at the edge. A black silhouette, watching, patient. My friends laugh when I describe it, dismissing it as stress or imagination, but I know the truth. The shadow doesn't need to move to terrify. It simply exists, and that is enough. I can still feel the weight of its gaze, the oppressive quiet that falls when it is near, the unnatural sway of the wheat as if alive. I've avoided any remote field since that summer, knowing the silhouette is not just a spirit, not just a ghost. It's something older, something tied to the land itself, a sentinel for the unseen forces of the prairie. The shadow taught me a lesson I cannot forget. Some things are meant to be watched, but never approached. And in the wheat fields of Morris, it will wait, patient, eternal, and hungry for attention. The fields, the lakes, the abandoned roads, and the isolated farmhouses of Manitoba hold more than just beauty. They hold shadows that linger long after the sun sets. Tonight, we've walked through 7 of the most disturbing true horror stories from this province. Each one a chilling reminder that the world around us is not always as safe as it seems. From phantom fishermen pulling unseen lines in icy waters, to featureless silhouettes lurking in golden wheat, to dark presences that toy with our fear, Manitoba's darkness has revealed itself in ways that defy reason. These are not tales for the faint of heart. They are real, documented encounters from ordinary people, men and women, who thought they were alone, only to discover that some entities watch, wait, and test the living. The horrors you've heard tonight are only glimpses of a world just beyond our perception, waiting silently, patiently, to be discovered. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.